Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The top stories that we're tracking for you this evening. The situation remains relatively calm along the Indo-Pak border, but Indian forces on high alert. Prime Minister Modi meets Air Force warriors at Punjab's Adampur Airbase, reiterates that Operation Sindoor is the new normal when it comes to India's stance on terrorism. The Indian government says that trade did not come up in any talks with the United States on the evolving military situation. This comes a day after President Trump claimed that he threatened to cut trade with India and Pakistan to broker a ceasefire. The government maintains that Jammu and Kashmir issue will be solved bilaterally. Indian equities take a breather after Monday's breathtaking rally. The Sensex and the Nifty dip around 1.5% each. The mid-cap index continues to trade in the green. The rupee strengthens against the dollar, but is off early highs on dollar buying by importers. Tata Motors beats estimates with its Q4 numbers, helped by strong traction its commercial vehicle business. JLR achieves the lower end of its FY25 EBIT margin guidance of 8.5%. Also meets its target of becoming net cash positive, but the outlook remains cautious as it points to uncertainty from tariffs and geopolitical actions. Bharti Airtel reports a strong Q4 with revenues rising better than expected, 27% year-on-year. Performance is helped by strong growth in Africa and average revenue per user rising 17% to 245 rupees. Inflation falls to a near 6-year low in April, eases to 3.16%, driven primarily by lower food and oil prices, gives the RBI elbow room to cut rates in June. President Trump lands in Saudi Arabia for the first leg of a 3-day tour to the Middle East, holds talks with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, covering a range of issues including investments, defense, regional security and Riyadh's civil nuclear program. He will then head to Qatar and UAE. Products from Turkey caught in the crosshairs of the India-Pakistan tensions. Boycott Turkey trending across Indian social media after Ankara condemned India's military strikes on terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Travel aggregators urge tourists to avoid non-essential travel to Turkey. Justice Sanjiv Khanna retires as the 51st Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after a brief tenure of just over 6 months. Justice B.R. Govt to assume the office of Chief Justice tomorrow. But straight to the top story this evening. The situation along the India-Pakistan border continues to remain relatively calm. However, Indian forces are on high alert. Now, Prime Minister Modi visited Punjab's Adampur Air Force Base and interacted with air warriors. Adampur is India's second largest Air Force base, and it was one of the key military sites that Pakistan attempted to attack last week. The Prime Minister also shared pictures of him with a MiG-29 jet and an intact Russian S-400 air defense system in the background. The pictures debunk Pakistan's claims that missiles from the JF-17 fighter caused heavy damage to the Adampur Airbase and in fact destroyed the S-400. So that's a very clear indication of the lies being peddled. In an address to personnel at the Adampur Airbase, the Prime Minister said that Operation Sindoor is the new normal and called the Indian Air Force's contribution unimaginable, exemplary and outstanding.
जब हमारी बहनों बेटियों का सिंदूर छीना गया तो हमने आतंकियों के फन को उनके घर में घुस के कुचल दिया। भारत माता की जय! भारत माता की जय! भारत माता की जय! वो कायरों की तरह छिप कर आए थे, लेकिन भूल गए उन्होंने जिसे ललकारा है वो हिंद की सेना है।
That's the Prime Minister at the Adampur Airbase. The Indian government has said that trade did not come up in any talks with the US on the evolving military situation. Now, this comes after US President Donald Trump claimed that he threatened to cut trade with both India and Pakistan to broker a ceasefire. Listen in to what President Trump had to say yesterday and the response that's come in from the Ministry of External Affairs in India.
We helped a lot, and we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade.
There were conversations between Indian and US leaders on the evolving military situation. The issue of trade did not come up in any of these discussions.
Well, that is the Indian government saying clearly that the issue of trade did not come up in the conversations between the US officials and Indian officials in any form or fashion in response to what was going on in India and Pakistan. Now, the Indian government has also clarified that Jammu and Kashmir issue is a bilateral issue and it is not open for any third-party mediation, also making it clear that India will not fall for any nuclear blackmail. Remember, Prime Minister Modi, during his address to the nation and again today in the Air Force Base in Adampur, issued a similar warning to Pakistan. Parikshit is standing by now to take us through where things currently stand. Pakistan being sent a clear message yesterday by the Prime Minister and, of course, being reiterated today. But the significance of the Prime Minister's visit to Adampur, which is a strategic base for the Indian Air Force, Parikshit, and the Prime Minister's images there standing next to the S-400 and the MiG-29, debunking Pakistan's claim that Adampur had been decimated.
Yes, this is India's second largest Air Force base, and Prime Minister sent a very strong message by standing with the air warriors that he backed them fully, that Operation Sindoor against terrorists was successful and India was able to disable and severely damage at least 11 air bases in Pakistan. We also sent out a message that contrary to what Pakistani forces in the media were claiming, Adampur Airbase had not been damaged. Having said that, India has also now gone on to record to counter Donald Trump, who said that he has been a mediator in the India-Pakistan conflict, and he played mediator by offering to trade with both India and Pakistan and told them that if you want to trade and if you want to have trade deals with the United States, then you need to have to stop the conflict. The Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson today went on record to say that the issue of trade did not come up in any discussion with the United States since 7th of May, when we began Operation Sindoor, targeting terror camps on Pakistani soil. On Kashmir, India has once again made it very clear, and this is after Donald Trump said that he's willing to find a solution on Kashmir. Kashmir is and will always be a bilateral issue, and the only thing that can be discussed is when POK can be handed over to India. Having said that, we also have said on record that it was only the force of the Indian firing that made Pakistan rush to the US to seek talks and rush to India to stop and seek DGMO talks as well. On the Indus Waters Treaty, the government has said there's going to be no change. The Indus Water Treaty remains in abeyance as Operation Sindoor is still on. As far as the nuclear angle is concerned, the government going on record to say that we will not be threatened by any blackmailing with the use of nuclear weapons of any sort, and we've made this very clear to everyone around the world as well. As far as hyphenation of India-Pakistan, the government said this is not possible. There is widespread understanding in the global community that Indian civilians were ruthlessly killed by terrorists in Pahalgam, and the world understands that it is important for terrorists to be booked, to be punished for what happened in Pahalgam.
Absolutely, Parikshit. Many thanks for joining us. Now, as a consequence of what has been happening overnight, where there was some drone sightings in a region like Samba, which is close to Jammu and Kashmir, we've seen the impact of that on Indian aviation. Indigo and Air India have cancelled flights to some regions in Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab and Gujarat till today. Now, this despite the fact that the government has opened up the Indian airspace for all commercial operations. Madiha is standing by with more details. Madiha, what are your sources telling you? So, at this point in time, there is no TAM to suggest that these airports are going to be closed for operations again, but yet airlines have cancelled flights, at least for today, to some of these key locations.
Absolutely. There is no NOTAM, and that's a sign of relief. Before I tell you about why Air India and Indigo cancelled flights today, the Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu met airlines today to take stock of the situation of how flights were reorganized and cancelled since the 7th of May. So sources tell us that representatives of all major airlines were present at this meeting, and airlines raised concerns about the declining passenger loads during peak travel seasons. We also have been highlighting that airlines are seeing declining passenger traffic. Airlines requested the ministry for ATF relief. We are told that regional airlines highlighted the loss of viability gap funding that they received from the government during the 6 days of flight cancellations and urged the minister regulator to adjust that amount at the end of the route tenure. On the situation with respect to the 32 airports, we had reported yesterday that flight resumptions to the border airports will take some time. Airlines had announced that they will resume flights gradually to these airports, but two major airlines, Indigo and Air India, cancelled flights for today. Indigo cancelled flights to Jammu, Srinagar, Leh, Amritsar, Chandigarh and Rajkot, while Air India cancelled flights to Jammu, Leh, Jodhpur, Amritsar, Bhuj, Jamnagar and Chandigarh. The cancellations probably came after what happened yesterday with Indigo flight. Indigo was the first airline to resume operations to the closed airports with 3 flights yesterday. The Delhi to Jammu flight landed safely, Delhi to Chandigarh flight landed safely, but the Delhi to Amritsar flight had to return midway, and sources say the aircraft wasn't given permission to land after some drones were sighted in the airspace. So both Indigo and Air India have stayed away from border regions for today, and other airlines like Air India Express resumed flights today. The airline started with 4 flights: Hindon, Bengaluru, Jammu, Delhi, Jammu, Srinagar and Srinagar to Delhi. SpiceJet too started operations with Delhi to Srinagar flight today. The airline will also restart Hajj 2025 flights from Srinagar starting tomorrow. So things are crawling back to normalcy given how dynamic and evolving the situation is. But as you mentioned, at least no notices so far to close the airports. So that's a major sign of relief.
Madhya, many thanks for joining us. Well, let's talk about the market action for the day. Indian equities taking a bit of a breather after Monday's breathtaking rally. So we saw the Sensex and the Nifty dipping by about 1.5% each. So the Sensex closing 1281 points low, 346 points low on the Nifty. The bank index lost about 442 points, but the mid-cap still closed in positive territory, up by about 100 points. That is where we closed for the day. But big day for earnings. Let's start with Bharti Airtel, ahead of street estimates with its Q4 numbers, helped by a higher than expected 27% jump in revenue. Net profit coming in at over 11,000 crores, largely due to a deferred tax gain of 4,200 crore rupees. But even adjusting for this, net profit is higher than the widely expected 6,500 crore rupees. EBITDA and margins also higher than expectations. The company's average revenue per user, or ARPU, has surged over 17% to 245 rupees from a year ago period. So that's certainly good news there coming in for Bharti Airtel. Tata Motors Q4 performance ahead of expectations, helped by strong traction in its commercial vehicles business. Jaguar Land Rover achieving the lower end of the FY25 EBIT margin guidance of 8.5%. JLR also met its target of becoming net cash positive. However, Tata Motors has said that the outlook remains cautious on account of the uncertainty from tariffs and geopolitical actions. The auto major has also announced that it had gifted the Curve and the Tiago EV to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So now you'll see the Tata EVs at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Hero Moto ahead of expectations in Q4 as the price hikes boosted margins as well as realizations. Revenues ahead of expectations, up 4% compared to last year. Net profit and EBITDA margins were in line with estimates. The company said it remains cautiously optimistic about its near to mid-term outlook. And on to Pharma. Cipla's numbers largely in line with expectations. Net profit ahead of estimates while margins missed the mark. Net profit rose more than 30%. Revenues up 9.2% on an annual basis. The company's announced a total dividend of 16 rupees for shareholders. So that's Cipla for you. The big macro story today. Inflation down to a near 6-year low for the month of April. The consumer price index easing to 3.16%, driven primarily by lower food and oil prices. Lata joins us now to take us through the inflation internals. Certainly good news there, Lata.
Yes, it's really good news on the inflation front. The number coming in at 3.16 is a 5 or a 6-year low. The last time we saw this kind of a number was in 2019. As well, the food inflation is a 42-month low. The last time we saw this number, this kind of a 1.78% food inflation number, was way back in 2021. So both food inflation and overall headline inflation coming in below expectations and coming in at multi-year lows is good news for the Reserve Bank and the expectations of a rate cut. To get into the nitty-gritties, what has clearly surprised the market is that cereal inflation and vegetable inflation are below the March levels, which is a surprise because you normally see vegetable prices rising in April, but they are way below, of course, year-ago levels. The vegetable inflation is down 10% compared to last year's levels. The surprise element has been fruit, which has been rising, but it's not. It's a volatile item and it is not very weighty in the CPI index. The core inflation has come in at 4.1, but if you take away the impact of gold, that also falls to around 3.5%. So really, the Reserve Bank has comfort on all indexes when it meets for the monetary policy on the 6th of June. LPG prices and milk prices were raised in the month of April. In spite of it, the headline inflation is coming in below market expectations and way below the Reserve Bank expectation. That will be another positive. So one can be very sure that with this kind of an inflation number, which is the last number the Reserve Bank has when it meets on June 6th, a rate cut is a given.
Thanks very much. Good news on the inflation front. Now, President Trump has commenced his first trip to the Middle East. His 3-day tour will also include a visit to Qatar and the UAE. Now, this is his first official state visit of his second presidency. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman greeted Trump upon arrival in Riyadh. Tesla CEO Elon Musk, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman have accompanied Trump to Saudi. Trump and the Saudi prince signed an economic partnership agreement. They also announced cooperation in energy, mining and defense, among others. An industry has written to the Finance Ministry flagging issues with the input tax credit system. Timsy is standing by to explain to us what they are concerned about. What does industry want from the government, Timsy?
Well, that's right. Sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the industry has written to Finance Ministry flagging off issues with respect to input tax credit system under the GST regime. According to the representations, industry has requested reforms including tradability and transfer of accumulated credits. It has also sought that government should consider allowing to use credits for reverse charge mechanism, for releasing payments and much more. Industry says that there is an urgent need to resolve ITC issues and these reforms can lead to a more business-friendly environment. It can unlock capital and will also help drive investments and boost India's position in global trade. Currently, the industry is unable to use ITC due to mismatched outward supplies, which is creating cash flow issues. Also, there are cases with accumulated ITC where industry is facing financial strain due to mandatory cash payments under the reverse charge mechanism. The companies are also facing operational inefficiency due to restrictions of transfer of ITC between distinct entities. The industry is also asking the government that if it can consider aligning this space with international best practices, also allowing companies to use accumulated ITC for reverse charge mechanism payments. They've also suggested introduction of an annual refund system to liquidate accumulated ITC. Also, they've come up with their view that government can consider allowing ITC transfer between distinct entities within the same organization, extending inverted duty refund formula to include service-related ITC, helping cut ITC accumulation, and a lot more. Now to be seen is whether these suggestions actually come down to ground, and if the government actually gets some of these suggestions into action, will they ease the burden that the industry is citing or not? Something that we'll have to wait and watch for.
All right, Timsy, many thanks for joining us. Now, the Supreme Court bid farewell to Chief Justice of India, Sanjiv Khanna, who passes on the baton to Justice B.R. Gavai. Ashmi joins us to sum up Justice Khanna's 6-month tenure, which, though brief, wasn't without tension. Ashmit.
Well, I met the CJI Justice Khanna over a cup of tea just a few days before his retirement. And as a curious journalist, I inquired about the investigation into cash at Justice Yashwant Verma's residence. His reply was curt but pointed. He said, "If there's any news coming from the Supreme Court, you can rest assured it's not from me." Words that symbolize his 6-month tenure at the helm of the Indian judiciary. Justice Sanjiv Khanna retires as India's 51st Chief Justice, having taken over the reins in November of 2024. He's had a brief tenure of just a little over 6 months. As he walks out of courtroom number 1 in Supreme Court, taking his seat as India's 52nd Chief Justice will be Justice Bhushan Ramakrishna Gavai. Now, for someone who followed the media blitz of former CJI Justice Chandrachud, Justice Khanna's tenure was unusually quiet. But quiet did not mean without tension. The biggest issue during his tenure was a situation almost out of a 90s Bollywood production. On the night of March 14th, a fire broke out at the residence of Delhi High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Verma. On reaching the location, fire marshals discovered gunny bags full of half-burnt cash. An unprecedented crisis, social media fury and public confidence at an all-time low in the judiciary. Now, to restore lost faith, CJI Khanna followed the mantra, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." On March 22nd, in a first-of-its-kind move, CJI Khanna published all the details on the Supreme Court website. The website now had pictures and videos of the cash, reports by the Delhi police, as well as even reports by the Delhi High Court Chief Justice recommending a probe. Subsequently, CJI Khanna appointed a 3-judge inquiry committee which submitted its report within 45 days on May 5th. And by May 8th, Justice Khanna had already dispatched this report and Justice Verma's response to the President and to the Prime Minister. Now, here's what's interesting. As per the Supreme Court's in-house procedure, the CJI is required to refer the matter to the President and the Prime Minister only if the inquiry committee has found substance in allegations and has recommended his removal and the judge has refused to resign. CJI Khanna may have paved the way for a rare impeachment proceeding. Moving ahead, another key feature of his tenure will be the judges disclosing their assets to the public. In a first, on the 6th of May, 21 out of 33 judges disclosed their assets and investments on the Supreme Court website. That figure has now risen to as high as 24. This was seen as another step by Justice Khanna to restore confidence after the Justice Yashwant Verma episode. What makes this unique is that similar resolutions for sharing asset details were floated in 1997 and 2009, but most judges chose to avoid any disclosure or scrutiny. On the judicial side, CJI Khanna left his mark on the Waqf case. In a power move, the centre passed the Waqf Act with much fanfare. CJI Khanna, however, stood in the way. He expressed concerns about non-Muslims in Waqf boards and Waqf Council. He also questioned the government on change of status of existing Waqf properties. Now, Justice Khanna had proposed a stay of this new act. Alarmed, the centre undertook that under this new act, no new appointments will be made and status of Waqf properties will not be changed. Justice Khanna also brought an end, at least for now, to the politics of Mandir Masjid. A spurt of cases and trial court orders directing surveys of mosques and dargahs for remnants of temples had led to religious tensions and violence. On December 12th, Justice Khanna passed orders barring any fresh suits for religious sites and stayed trial courts from passing orders directing surveys. Now, even before he became the Chief Justice of India, he had left his imprint on several key cases. Now, he's ruled that CJIs were subject to the RTI. In a landmark case, he was a part of a 5-judge bench that abrogated Article 370. Last year, he was part of another landmark 5-judge bench that struck down electoral bonds as illegal. Interestingly, he also granted bail to Arvind Kejriwal in an ED case to let him campaign during the Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Now, Justice Khanna has tried to play it by the book as a judge and as an administrator. But with cases like challenges to the UAPA, the PMLA and the CAA still pending, some are asking if, despite his brief stint, he could have done more.
Well, a short stint as the Chief Justice of India, but otherwise a long career there and many landmark judgments that he was a part of. That's Justice Khanna for you. And he's also said very clearly that he will not be taking up any appointments post this. Up next on India Business Hour, products from Turkey got in the crossfire of the India-Pakistan tensions. Boycott Turkey trends on social media. That and more when we return. You can catch all of CNBC-TV18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. Well, the other big story, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal will visit the US from the 17th to the 20th of May. Sources tell us that the Commerce Minister will meet US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Trade Representative Jameson Greer. Abhimanyu Sharma joins us now. Abhimanyu, so the next round of talks between India and the US, tell us more about what is likely to be on the agenda as the Commerce Minister heads to the US.
A fresh round of developments is expected between India and the US for trade talks for a bilateral trade agreement between both the countries, which is being negotiated by negotiators from both the sides. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is expected to travel to the United States and speak to the US Trade Representative and the US Commerce Secretary between 17th to the 20th of May. Also, chief negotiators from both the sides would be engaged in discussions from the 19th to the 22nd of May in the United States. It remains to be seen what exactly comes out of these talks and how early both the sides are looking to conclude the first tranche of a bilateral trade agreement between both the countries. Also, the proposal at the WTO for retaliatory tariffs on steel and aluminium is not binding. That is something which sources have indicated. They have added that it's entirely up to India whether it wants to impose those retaliatory tariffs, and India reserves the right to impose retaliatory tariffs after a period of 30 days. And even in the past, there have been instances when India had the opportunity but did not levy tariffs as far as the ones which were proposed before the WTO is concerned. Also, the issue of retaliatory tariffs with respect to India's proposal at the WTO may also figure in the discussions and negotiations between both the sides. As of now, India and the US are looking to benefit from the 90-day window for which the imposition of tariffs had been suspended by the United States. The US had suspended additional 26% tariffs on India till the 9th of July, while only keeping the baseline 10% tariffs for now. It remains to be seen how early any negotiations would take place and what kind of deal would be worked out before the 9th of July.
Manu, many thanks for joining us. Now, products from Turkey caught in the crossfire of India-Pakistan tensions. Boycott Turkey is trending on Indian social media. Shivani joins us to tell us more about what has triggered this response and who is involved. Shivani.
Well, yes, a growing online movement is gaining serious traction. Boycott Turkey is trending across Indian social media, with users calling for a complete economic and tourism boycott of Turkish products and services. But what triggered the sharp backlash? It began with the wave of anger on social media after Turkey publicly condemned India's military strikes on terror camps in Pakistan and POK. On May 7th, the Turkish foreign minister issued a strong statement warning that India's action raises the risk of an all-out war. But the backlash escalated further when forensic analysis of drones shot down by Indian forces revealed a disturbing detail. The drones were of Turkish origin, allegedly used in attacks launched from Pakistani territory. Soon after, Indian users began circulating lists of Turkish brands from appliances and food to fashion and travel, urging fellow consumers to stop supporting Turkish-linked businesses. Posts that read, "India helped Turkey in its darkest hour, Turkey helped Pakistan in ours," quickly went viral. The anger wasn't limited to social media. The travel industry took swift action. Ease My Trip issued an advisory urging tourists to avoid non-essential travel to Turkey. Cox & King and Ixigo followed by suspending new bookings to the country, citing rising geopolitical tensions. Now let's take a look at the stakes involved. Bilateral trade between India and Pakistan stood at $13.8 billion in 2022-23 and $10.43 billion last year, with Indian exports leading the numbers. Turkey also has received over $227 million in FDI from India till March 2024, and Indian companies have invested nearly $200 million there. But the biggest hit could come from tourism. In 2024 alone, more than 2.75 lakh Indian tourists visited Turkey, contributing nearly 3,000 crore rupees to its economy. With growing calls to disengage, this flow could now slow down dramatically. With over 3,000 crore rupees in tourism revenue from Indian travelers and $10.4 billion in annual bilateral trade, Turkey has a lot riding on its ties with India. If the boycott Turkey sentiment translates into real action, fewer bookings, falling demand for Turkish products, or paused investment decisions, the economic hit could be hard and visible. Back to you.
Shivani, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. From all of us here, thanks very much for watching. The news will continue on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more. Thanks for watching.